All right. Well, I'm honored to be back with the heavy hitters. So, stoked to be talking with you guys today. Can you talk? So, this panel is called Winning Strategies, Leveraging Sports Investments for Maximum Consumer Impact. You both have a very storied history of working in sports marketing. Can you talk a little bit about just your experience and then your current org and how you're currently leveraging sports in your initiatives?
All right. We were joking about we were going to kick stuff to each other. So I spent roughly a decade working at Red Bull, working in sports marketing and brand marketing there, and really finding ways to drive greater, find ways for us to pull equity, pull some of the equity from the branded initiatives that we were doing into the business, right? So a big part of my job was truly focused on ROI. So with whether they were branded events, athlete activations, or athlete initiatives, or content activations, I was finding ways to really pull down into retail, but working very closely with our sports marketing teams and our athlete teams to find ways to do that. And then more recently, now I'm at Beyond Meat, leading all marketing there, brokering agreements with different sports franchises and companies, as well as athlete marketing, working. We've got something like 20-something athletes that we're currently working with who are consumers of the brand and the product and help us amplify a lot of our messaging to their audiences.
That sounds amazing. I have to follow that. So I've spent the last, I would say, 23 years, which I know is hard to believe because I look 27. Started working when I was 3, clearly. Working with massive sports brands because as a sports fan, I thought if I can find work where somebody was willing to pay me to actually think about the things that I'm already thinking about, like, wow, I've really pulled one over on them. So I spent about 12 years at Nike working across brand marketing in different capacities and functions, both on the North America side and global, with my last role being on football because I'm a huge fan of both the NFL and NCAA. So again, somebody decided to give me money to actually go attend all the games of the teams that I love so much. That was really fun. And then I went over to Adidas where it was a combination of sports and entertainment, with my last role there being focused on really the collaborations with Pharrell and Beyonce, which as a music fan, again, the fact that I've conned these people to like pay me to do this work is quite tremendous. And then post-COVID, which as I'm sure everybody went through some type of transformational sort of personal journey where you thought about perspective and what your role in society was going to be, I became a mom, and so for me, connecting with a brand that really stood behind investing in girls and women and women's sports was really important. And so the opportunity to connect with Athleta and be able to make an impact on the scale that we're aiming to make has been just really near and dear to my heart as somebody who's forcing sport on my 3-year-old right now. It's just been quite the journey, but all of that to say that each of these moments have been really interesting to reflect on how brands approach partnerships when it comes to athletes and entertainers. And as we've evolved from the tools that we have that allow us to not only measure success, but find the places and spaces where we can expand on those investments, you see the evolution of that. I feel like I started working before the internet, and now I'm working where there's Web3 and NFTs have come and gone. And so it's been, again, like a marketer's dream, being able to play with all these different ingredients in ultimately telling the stories of not just brands, but the partners that we then get the opportunity to work with. I want to double click into something that you said about, joining Athleta and being passionate about their dedication to women and empowering young girls. Can you talk about how does that play into, and I think a lot, but how you ensure your sports sponsorships are aligning with the core values of the brand? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're on a journey right now to reinvigorate the brand, and our point of separation in the marketplace is this notion of the power of she, like we wear it very proudly, But part of that is about inspiring women and girls to find their confidence and their strength. And in that, that's underpinned by their well-being. Because what we've seen is that the data out there, the science tells us that, especially for girls and women, when sports or movement is a ingredient in their life, they actually perform better as human beings in how they show up, whether they're a mom, whether they're a lawyer, whether they're in corporate. It's something that we continue to go back to. And so when we think about our values and we think about the people that we partner with, it's really critical for us not to look at things through the lens of, well, this person is a phenomenon, so we need to write a check, do an endorsement, and make sure that we're putting their name behind our campaigns. It's really about understanding who they are as people, what their values are, and if and when we decide to enter that relationship together, how does that investment go beyond just the campaign? And so when you think about someone like Simone Biles coming off of the Olympics, part of what was critical in the partnership that we started with her in 2021 is understanding what are the elements of Simone that go beyond gymnastics, so that whether she's on the mat or off the mat, we can be a supporting ally to her in telling those narratives, because we know that she's so much more dynamic than the single slice of her as an athlete. And it forces you to make harder decisions that way, because the former is a lot easier to do and you're able to quantify your portfolio much quicker. But for us, we want to be quite surgical about who we partner with, because we know the athlete journey has a starting point and an ending point, and we want to be there before and the after, as well as the during.
And I think to your point, that partnership started well before the amazing showing this summer at Paris. So.
Well, absolutely. And coming off of Tokyo, there was the narrative around her, which was quite disappointing in how the media sort of spun that out. But the narrative had a lot of uncertainty. And so for us, we weren't sure what was going to happen in Paris. We didn't know what level of competition she would be going into. And she wasn't openly talking about that because she wasn't in that space at that moment. And for anybody who has seen the Netflix documentary, the first 2 episodes, she really opens up about the space that she was in mentally and what she was reflecting on. And that was a really important turning point for us, to really understand her as a person and to really understand the things that are important to her and the role that mental health plays in her life, so that, again, we can be a partner and ally that goes beyond the mat. And then you have this tremendous performance coming out of Paris, and everyone's like, how did you guys get Simone in this moment? And it was about cultivating that relationship so early on, to whether she was going to compete in Paris or not, we were going to be standing behind her.
I think you talk about things that matter to her as an individual. Speaking of that, nutrition, and how have you worked with athletes? Like, that's, people are so passionate about especially athletes, what they're putting in their body. How has Beyond Meat leveraged authentic partnerships with the NBA or individual players or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, in 2009, Ethan Brown founded Beyond Meat on the principle that he wanted to create meat from plants that was indistinguishable from animal protein to advance 4 key areas, right? The first was human health. The second was animal welfare. And the third and fourth really do center around environment or sustainability, really to help us avert climate disaster. So we think about the core values of Beyond Meat, they really do sit against those pillars. And when we go and find athletes that we're looking to work for, we're really looking at how they align to that. Not everybody that we work with is fully plant-based, and that's very much by intention. Over half of our heavy consumers eat animal protein 80% of the time. So we know that we're not speaking to a core vegan or vegetarian. So as we're looking at athlete partnerships and relationships, it's really how do they align with each of these pillars? Is this something that they truly care about? And to your point, it's a lot easier just to cut a check to a really big name that's got a really big audience, but you want to be there authentically with them. So, like, I'll spend a minute talking about Josh Hart, who is an athlete. He plays for the New York Knicks. I'm also a Knicks fan. I know.
Just go to work.
But he plays for the New York Knicks. He signed there last year. And we were doing a partnership with Madison Square Garden. We have Knicks and Rangers rights. And we're looking to actually do a multi-level deal, right? We wanted to make sure that we had a team deal. We wanted to have an athlete deal. It would have been great to get a league deal, but we didn't have that budget. So we were looking at the different players on the roster, And we started looking at, we started having conversations with their people about, hey, are they partially plant-based? Are they open to plant-based? What do they think about plant-based eating as it relates to their health? Do they care about the environment? What does sustainability mean for them? And Josh had some really strong answers, and his representation was really great about speaking to who he was and where he was at the time. And when we got with him, nobody really knew who Josh Hart was outside of New York. And, it was really exciting because he was very open to partner with us and really interested in learning more about how plant-based eating could actually help him. So we actually gave him a lot of products. We worked with his nutritionist and his chef and his culinary team to make sure that he was being fed plant-powered plant protein. And, whether it's because of our products or not, he had an incredible season. I'll take the cred, right? But he ended up leading the league in minutes played, and it was all plant powered. There was actually several. He was talking to. It was a great season. He was talking.
It's a league partnership. This is your media moment.
This is it, right? But he was talking to a guy named Mike Breen. And Mike Breen was asking him, how are you so much on a tear? He says, well, I eat a Beyond Steak burrito before every game. And I was like, shit, I didn't pay for that. and it kind of blew up all over social. It was fantastic. But it was because we truly understood what he was trying to accomplish. He was dealing with a lot of fatigue. So we said, hey, going to a plant-based diet is going to help you with your fatigue. It's going to help you with inflammation. We leveraged Chris Paul, who's a guy that we've been working with for several years, to help kind of cement that understanding with him and other athletes that we work with. So it was really powerful for us. But again, it would have only worked had there been alignment there. So even as we talk about his announcement video that we shared on our platforms as well as his, he talked about sustainability. He talked about the importance of eating plant-based protein as it relates to averting climate disaster. And it was really a beautiful alignment with what we, in our relationship.
I mean, these two brands, what incredible, just entities that you are and what you guys both stand behind. I mean, I think at the end of the day, though, we are businesses. And you talked about, the mention of the burrito. How'd you quantify that ROI? I don't know. But how do you think about measurement for sports partnerships, especially with some of these that have such big, intangible emotional pulls?
We're going to give it to me for a second.
Absolutely.
I'm stealing this line from our Gap Inc. CEO around this notion of relevance and revenue, and they're intrinsically linked. You can't have one without the other. And so when we think about, on the brand marketing side, it's always around awareness and reach, and we leverage our social platforms to really gauge where are we with EMV and how's the community responding to us, how are creators responding to us, who's willing to talk about us when we're not paying them to do so in an organic way. And then when we think about paid and performance marketing, which when I started at Nike, performance marketing didn't even exist. No, that was not a department, that was not a person, that was not measured. So to think, in 2024, it's something that we do absolutely measure. It goes back to, how are we using our narratives to drive that affinity for the brand, which always leads to point of sale in some capacity, whether that's through .com, whether that's through app, whether that's through retail. And we have our metrics that we're constantly tracking, but also being really mindful of, for a brand that is at an inflection point of reinvigoration, when we're looking for share of heart, that is not measurable in like a in the moment sort of metric that I can go to my finance team and say, we just had this great moment at the Olympics and it equates to this many people bought our product. It's about this slow churn and the belief and the trust that while there's a desire to grow the brand and grow the love, there's also another arm of the brand that's also pushing the media to get impressions and to get reach and to have consideration and to have conversion that's working at a faster pace, but they're not created equal and not at all times. And so being able to give people confidence when that doesn't feel like maybe something, again, not to poo-poo on the finance team because I love them, but the instant gratification isn't always there. And so for us, we work really hard to keep our cross-functional partners educated on when we're pulling on which one to ensure that everyone's aware that they're not created equal and we have that partnership back to us. And here's how we're standing up the brand. Here's how we're making change.
I mean, honestly, it's one of the hardest it's one of the hardest things to actually get your cross-functionals to. Oh, okay. I broke it. Hello, did I break this one? Hello? Hello? Okay. Yeah, it's one of the toughest things to do with your cross-departmental peers, right? Is making sure that they understand the why behind what you do. When I first started at Red Bull, we had this mindset that, hey, the brand is far bigger than the business, right? And we were spending, hundreds of millions of dollars a year on building brand equity for the company. And we were spending a fraction of that. I mean, a very, very small percentage on driving product consumption. And there was a leadership at the time that said, hey, we need to change that. We need to actually start pushing more of the product marketing. We need to drive consumption in this way. And we need to start pulling back on brand equity. And then we saw our sales start to flatten and slide. And this is after years and years of either like high single digit or double digit growth. And what we learned coming out of that was there is a positive correlation to brand love and product consumption. There's a virtuous cycle that exists between the two. And if you're focused too heavily on driving consumption, and this is something tough, especially when we're in this performance marketing mindset and customer acquisition mindset right now. But if you stop focusing on building the top of that funnel, building affinity, awareness, trust, and love, then you're going to start to see that you become interchangeable with your competition. And it was a really important lesson for us, a decade ago. And now in the world that I'm in right now, it's something that I continue to have to educate my board on. Well, why are we focused on this partnership in New York? Why are we looking for more partnerships across the country? It's because affinity is so important. Brand love is so important. Brand associations are so important. Brand recall is so important. And we're constantly measuring that and testing it and seeing how we're doing. And we're using other indicators to help us understand how we're performing. So we're looking at follower growth by region, right? We're seeing how we're looking at sales at the zip code level within specific markets and just trying to see if we can pinpoint or triangulate what success looks like as it relates to these sports partnerships and athlete relationships that we have. But it is quite challenging. But I always have to go back to, guys, brand love is critically important. And as we see that go up, we see household penetration go up. We see share of requirement go up. And we actually start to see greater conversion to consideration from awareness.
I think you kind of just laid out your playbook too in that, and I think would love to hear from you as well. Like if you're thinking about not just on the measurement side, but knowing that all of those things are factors, you're going to have to do a lot of test and learn. Just can you share like what are the core tenets of your playbook for sports marketing? And maybe I'll start with you.
Well, I actually want to double click one bit into what you said of that continual education around the importance of brand love and building a brand, because I think everybody has a desire to get there as quickly as possible and then move on to the next thing. And what we continue to talk about is this notion of like to truly build brand love, just truly sustain brand love, because consumers have so many options today. You have to keep feeding that beast, right? Because if you don't, then you become a commodity. And if you're a commodity, you're only competing on price. And if you're only competing on price, you're only going to win as the lowest price in the market, of which for Athleta, we absolutely are not. And as we play in the upper right-hand corner, you're constantly toggling between those two, right? So I think that's something that you're touching on that we continue to live and be a part of. And as it pertains to a playbook or cheat codes, it's being really honest about that not all things are created equal. What we do at the Paris Olympics is very different than what we do for a holiday campaign, and the role that an athlete or a partner plays in that, and the ROI that is associated with that. And when we think about the investment levels based on where the business is, being really responsible and understanding that, yes, at the end of the day, everyone in here, you're working for profit. Like you have to sell something, whatever that thing is. But you also find those moments and times where there's an uptick in what you're doing at a brand awareness level, and you're over investing, and where you're doing the day-to-day business. And if you try to always be at the brand awareness level, your ROI will be concerning, right? Because then you're spending so much money on demand creation. So finding that sweet spot all the time and finding that harmony. And I would say across industries, there's not a one size fits all. There's not one cheat code of if you do this, this is what will happen. It's reading and reacting and becoming comfortable in the while there's an 80% plan, there's a 20% you have to just react, and you're reacting at the pace of the consumer, you're reacting to the pace of a trend, you're reacting to Taylor Swift being at a football game. Like, all of those things play a factor on what we might have thought would be the plan on a Monday, but because of something that happened on Sunday, we're pivoting and we're adjusting, and we're going to learn from that. It might work, it might not, but I would say the last thing on that is empowering the team to fail fast. And that's something we talk about a lot of, like, we're in a business where we're selling leggings. Like, I love that we're changing the world, but, like, we're selling leggings and we're selling sports bras. I love that for us. There's no decision that anyone on the team is going to make that's going to put us out of business. So let's fail fast. Let's learn. Let's evolve, because through every single thing that we try and every risk that we take, we're going to learn something to make us stronger the next day, the next week, the next month. And I would say that's the cheat code that's very consistent, whether it's Athleta or Nike, Adidas, whoever, that has allowed us to move fast and be effective in the things that we do.
But you talked about, operating through kind of this ambiguous world that we're in and capitalizing on certain things as they come up. But I guess a final question for both of you: of the things that are emerging out there, what are you most excited about as it relates to sports marketing opportunities for brands?
This is weird. I had a conversation. I talk to people all the time. I love speaking with different sports teams and sports leagues, just learning what's out there and what the trends are happening. I spend quite some time talking to NFL teams, MLS teams. But I talked to a lacrosse league the other day, PLL. Really interesting league, really strong affinity, interesting footprint, overlaps well with us, and there's a relatively low barrier to really take over from a sponsorship perspective, and very free and access to the players and everything else, kind of like a Premier League team, in the UK. It's really interesting to me. These smaller emerging sports, especially coming from Red Bull. Red Bull's secret sauce was that we went where everyone else wasn't. We went to skate, we went to surf. No brands were really in there except for some of the really endemic brands. And we got there early, and the entire idea was that we would make sure that everything that we did was to really focus on the core of the community that really built, that built the scenes. So we really focused on that, and it's kind of my mindset now is that, yes, we have mass, and I think there's a big opportunity with having mass relationships and partnerships, but I think some of the more niche things get really interesting for me. Smaller communities, but highly engaged, and there's something really interesting to me about that.
I would say for me and the brand, if you haven't seen the sort of hockey stick effect of women's sports, I have no idea where you have been at this time. I think I've been very fortunate to never feel the effect of non-investment, because I worked on men's sports that are highly visible with leagues that have billions of viewers and billions of dollars of investment. Now to be part of a greater movement that allows women's sports not to only have a place in sort of history, but you see that crossover of sports and entertainment coexisting, which again feels so organic if you've worked in men's sports, but really is in its infancy on the women's side. That is so unbelievably exciting.
And also add culture, right? I mean, what women's sports are doing right now are truly influencing culture. I mean, we talked about the NFL fits, right, when they're coming to play the game, but
did you see the draft for the the WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, it's like you're at a runway. I mean, it's incredible.
It's phenomenal.
What these incredible athletes are doing for the sport, and Caitlin Clark is an entity, and I don't know, hopefully this doesn't sound bad, but I've been invited to go to WNBA games for a long time, and I really don't ever do it, right? There are a lot of other options out there. But for the first time I went to a WNBA game, it was a Sparks game, and Caitlin Clark was playing, because I wanted to see Caitlin Clark. But while there, I saw all these other incredible female athletes. I was like, oh my gosh. So that day I called up and said, hey, make sure you get on a call with such and such's agent. I'd like to talk to her about this, that, and the other. Because it exposed me to so much more. And I think that's happening all over the place.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's truly a movement. And I think, when people talk about the brand, they're like, oh, you work for a women's brand, like you guys are so female empowerment, like what does that mean for men? And I'm like, it is just as critical for a LeBron to go to a WNBA game because of his reach and his influence as it is for Kim Kardashian to show up at the game, because together it shows the power that sport is having and the impact that it creates, and again the benefits of it both scientifically, culturally, societally. And coming off of Paris 24, thinking about LA 28, the conversations that we're having is like, oh my God, we can't even plan fast enough because LA 28 is tomorrow and it's 4 years out of the things that we're imagining and thinking about, even the flag football on the women's side of, we haven't even tapped into that. Like we've just started to scratch the surface, but the fact that there's so many brands getting behind that, it really opens the aperture for partnerships, both in expected and unexpected places for brands like Beyond Meat, for brands like Athleta, where it can be a triangulated effort versus just a brand partnered with an athlete and put them in a hoodie or put them on a, in a cleat or whatever that might be. So it's very, very exciting.
Unparalleled opportunity. Thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives. I think we have some time for questions, if anybody has.
So I always think the juxtaposition of passion versus what drives performance is an interesting conversation. And for purpose and passion-led brands, as you both are, oftentimes the best time to show up is through those organic moments where the passion behind the brand shines through. I thought the Josh Hart burrito before the game example was is a really solid one. So my question is, your thinking, your teams, like knowing that that's how a lot of your brand is going to show up in the world, how are you preparing yourselves for these wholly unplanned moments, which can be the sparks for driving performance to stay ahead of that as these things organically happen in the world?
I can hit on an example that actually happened a week ago, and it was both brilliant but also like quite eye-opening. So as many of you do in your day-to-day jobs, like you're trying to crack the code on content that's going to break through. Is it earned? Is it organic? Are you putting money behind it? How is it performing? Like we're so data driven and trying to sort of unlock things. The team called me the day that I was getting ready to fly back from Paris. So 3 weeks in Paris, I'm like a dead rat at this point, just trying to make it back to the country in one piece. And they're like, you're going to get an email. It's going to say approve goats. Just say yes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, we're bringing livestock into the building. They said you have to approve it because if you don't, we can't do it and we don't want to be fired. And I'm like, I honestly don't know what you're talking about, but just don't fuck this up. I'm going to approve it. Go. So they brought in 3 baby goats. They shot some content in our actual office. We put it up on social within 24 hours. It's the least amount of money I think we've spent historically on any piece of content. It has received over 6 million views. It is our most talked about piece of content. It's been covered by multiple media outlets, and it's literally like in the format of the old ESPN commercials, the Sports Center commercials, where like the elevator opens, these little goats walk out, it says 9 a.m. at Athleta HQ. They sort of walk around the office, and then it ends with the home of goats, because we had both Katie and Simone as our competing athletes. And people have lost their minds over this video. The amount of reposting by celebrities, athletes, and we didn't say a single thing about the product. We didn't say a single thing about our retail stores. We didn't say a single thing about the brand. It was so truly organic, and the impact that it had was just such a great lesson for us in where consumer minds are. And sometimes we have to just pause and look at like where the world is at and assess doing something that's fun and lighthearted and sparks joy versus being so formulaic in the things that we do, because we've got this data and this objective and this KPI and this cross-functional stakeholder. It was a great lesson to all of us, and our CEO of the brand and CEO of Gap Inc. has been using that as an example of like, it doesn't have to be the most complicated or the most highly produced to be the most effective. And to this day, it's our, from historical standpoint, our most successful, both measured and unmeasured piece of content that we've ever put out. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's very happy. Your kids will love it. My child has watched it about 200 times out of the 6 million views.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's it's everything you just said. It's about being nimble. It's about taking risks. I think one of the things that I've been working on right now is getting my boss and our board to be comfortable with risk taking, and like not understanding what we put on our content on our social. My team comes to me all the time and says, "Hey, Kay, can we do this?" I'm like, "Sure, why not? I don't get it, but do it anyway, right?" But I've recently started getting text messages from board members saying, "Hey, Kay, what does this mean?" I'm like, "It's not for you. Don't worry about it."
You're not the audience.
Yeah, you're not the audience. You're not supposed to get it. So we've got so many examples of that happening. We leverage smaller niche platforms to really test a lot of this more risky content that has nothing to do with our brand. I talked about Threads the last time I was on a stage, and Threads is now taking over. It's now our second largest platform, which is, third largest behind the Meta platforms. And I'm sorry, it's Meta as well. So it's the third largest platform, all within Meta. And it's weird because we grow 10%, 12% every month on that platform, and we don't talk about the product at all. And it's just we gave it to somebody. He's a contractor. We just said have fun. And he says some of the craziest things you'd ever see. And he talks about pretending to be a little cow with a cape. That's it. And at one point my boss said, "Hey, Kay, we got to stop this. This doesn't make any sense." I'm like, "Well, it's growing." And then I asked Kevin, the guy that runs the platform, I said, "Hey, man, can you send me snips of everybody who said that they're now buying the product because you pretend to be a little cow with a cape?" And he sent me like 30 of them. These are consumers who said, "I've never even considered your product. Because we love you so much, we're going to consume your product." And it was because we were being risky, we're being a little edgy, and we're having fun, and we did it kind of on the side where nobody was watching. So I think it's what you're everything you're saying, like, say yes to the goats,
Yeah.
Like,
I'm going to tell my CFO my new OKR is share of heart. We'll see how it goes over. But thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank